Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the fourth installment of A History of Symphony Tacoma. I'm Greg Youtz, been a long fan of the symphony since about 1984, and many of you know me as a frequent pre-concert lecturer for the symphony. Before we begin, let me just thank our sponsors for this event and so many other Symphony Tacoma events: Multicare, Tacoma Creates, the Arts Fund, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Washington State Arts Commission. Thank you all very much. Without you, these things would not happen. It is my great delight tonight, in this fourth installment, to bring back somebody who is yet another towering presence in the history of what we then called the Tacoma Symphony Orchestra. And this is, of course, Maestro Harvey Felder. Harvey was here as conductor and artistic director for 20 years, between 1994 and 2014. And he currently is still referred to by the symphony as Conductor Laureate of Symphony Tacoma. But of course, Harvey had a long career before he came to Tacoma and has had a distinguished career since he left Tacoma. So just to fill you in just a little bit, he was also the assistant conductor at the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, the resident conductor of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. He's a regular guest staff conductor at the Atlanta and Chicago Symphonies. He was the artistic advisor and conductor of the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra. He's been with the Fox Valley Symphony, the Johns Hopkins University Symphony, the Ann Arbor Summer Symphony, and he's been a guest conductor at many places around the US and indeed around the world. Since leaving Tacoma, Harvey has had a distinguished teaching career. He's been a faculty member at Eastern Michigan University, Haverford College, Johns Hopkins, West Virginia University, and most recently at the University of Connecticut for a while, and now currently at the University of Memphis, where he is the director of orchestral activities. Along the way, Harvey has received dozens of awards and recognitions from mayors, from cities, from musical organizations. So a long and distinguished career, both in Tacoma and prior and after Tacoma. Please help me welcome Maestro Harvey Felder.
Oh, hello, Greg. How are you?
It is great to see you.
I should say Professor Youtz.
Professor Felder.
Yes.
I must say, looking at you, it feels like no time has passed at all, and we could be about ready to go on stage on the Pantages tomorrow.
Well, in many ways, you're right. It feels like yesterday that I was there doing that last concert with the Tacoma Symphony, but in other ways, it feels like a lot of time has passed, and the world has changed dramatically, and so it's a little bit of both.
Indeed. Well, welcome back virtually to Tacoma and to this history series in which you have played such a historically important role. Before we get into what you were hired to do in Tacoma back in the early to mid 90s, let's play a little video that you made. It was an interview that you did with Rosemary Ponaconti, who of course was the arts and music writer for the for the News Tribune for many, many years. And this was upon your departure, kind of your final interview on the Pantages stage. Let's watch this short video.
All right.
On May 10th, Maestro Harvey Felder will give the last downbeat on his 20-year tenure as music director of the Tacoma Symphony Orchestra, a tenure that saw the ensemble grow from community to professional through Felder's planning and precision.
20 years is a long time for a music director, and I guess the average for music directors is 7 or 8 years, and so I've doubled that and some. So clearly, this is my home. This is a body of work, represents a body of work that helped shape me and shape my musical sensibilities. So leaving this will be a major change, a major life change. didn't think it would be 20 years. But this was a different situation. This was being hired to build something. It was a project.
Harvey came with a mission to the board, and he wanted to create a sound that was Tacoma Symphony sound.
What I was very concerned about initially were the fundamentals of music making. Precise rhythm, accurate rhythm, a rhythm that gives the ensemble a vitality. The next step, ensemble. Having a sense of this side of the orchestra, very aware of that side of the orchestra. Sounds basic, but it wasn't necessarily in place at the beginning.
He really wants things to be crystal clear and clean, especially with regard to rhythm. So I always come prepared with that in the back of my mind, that I know that Harvey is going to want my preparation to be rhythmically extremely precise, and of course the intonation has to be immaculate and all of that stuff as well.
I was trying very hard to make sure that people approached this as an artistic endeavor. I wanted every phrase to have a concept. We may change it, or it may not be what I'm looking for, but I wanted people to play with an intensity of making the music come alive. I will miss Tacoma and miss the patrons and the people who've supported the orchestra over the years, and miss the orchestra members. So yeah, it'll be a major transition. Last time.
Well, I hope people enjoyed that. I suspect a lot of people watching were just delighted to hear your voice again.
Oh, thank you. It was nice to see all of those familiar faces and take that stroll down memory lane. It was very nice, very nice.
I suspect that a lot of your audience fans, I mean, yes, you conduct the orchestra, but it was also the experience of you turning around and telling us what we were about to hear in that extraordinarily elegant and clear way that's just as vivid in their minds as what you were doing with your baton.
Well, absolutely. That was a big part of what I tried to bring to the art form and to the occasion. It was, of course, the music stands on its own and always will be able to stand on its own. But sometimes it's nice to have a guide that sort of prepares you for things that are coming and helps you understand why something is there, and then steps out of the way and lets you have that experience. And so I did that before I came to Tacoma, did it in Tacoma, and I continue to do it today. And the response has always been very positive. There's a way to do it. There's a way not to do it. And I think I've found the formula that seems to work, that inspires people and lets them enjoy the listening of the commentary without feeling like it gets in the way of the music.
Let's back up just a little bit and talk about you as a young musician growing up and your training and how you decided to choose conducting. Give us a little bit of that backstory.
Well, it's conducting was never the goal that I had in mind when I was growing up. I knew by seventh grade, I should say I knew by fourth grade, I wanted to be a teacher. And I knew by seventh grade that I wanted to be a music teacher. And so all of my preparation was getting me to the point where I could stand in front of a school band or a school orchestra and teach and make music. That was the goal. And best laid plans, things change. So I was studying as an undergrad at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and got my degree in music education. finished that degree, went out into the world and started teaching, enjoying it very much. It was everything I had hoped it would be, teaching high school band, junior high orchestra, and elementary band and orchestra. And then I decided after doing that for a number of years that I wanted to get a graduate degree. So that led me to the University of Michigan, our alma mater.
Yes, great.
And while I was there, I was pursuing a master's degree and more, again, in music education, with the intention of returning to the public school classroom, someplace, K through 12, and making more music. But I sort of got sidetracked by the study of conducting. I met some incredible teachers while at Michigan, and they all inspired me to think a little differently, to think about the possibilities a little differently. I had the wonderful opportunity to study with Elizabeth Green, the master pedagogue who wrote several books on conducting and on string pedagogy. I got to study with Elizabeth, and she inspired me to think slightly differently about a career path. And one thing led to the other. I kept studying and kept growing, and opportunities kept presenting themselves. Before I knew it, I finished my graduate degree, and almost literally an opportunity was dropped at my feet to conduct the Ann Arbor Summer Symphony. And then again, another opportunity just fell out of nowhere to be on the conducting staff of an organization called the Livonia Youth Symphony Organization. And they had 3 orchestras. I was just given the second orchestra. And now I'm looking over my shoulder thinking I was planning to go back to a public school system in Wisconsin. But at that point I said, well, let's ride this horse until it stops and see where it takes you. And it just never stopped. It never stopped. Before I knew it, I was conducting the Chicago Symphony, the Atlanta Symphony, assistant conductor with Milwaukee Symphony, resident conductor with St. Louis, as you said earlier. And it's just been one of those things. It's never stopped.
That's amazing. I love hearing these stories. So you arrived in Tacoma as the newly hired artistic director and conductor, and you had a mission from the board. As clearly as you remember it, what do you think they expected and wanted you to do?
Well, it was stated to me very simply. They said, we have a good amateur orchestra right now. We want a professional orchestra in Tacoma. And then I probed a little bit and I said, what does that mean? What does a professional orchestra mean to you? And it became pretty apparent fairly quickly that they weren't quite sure, or they didn't agree what that meant. So I spent a lot of time asking questions and making proposals. Does that mean we have a fully paid orchestra? Does that mean we play 50 weeks a year, or does it mean we play 18 weeks a year? Does it mean we hire a full-time staff to support the orchestra, full-time librarian, personnel manager, executive director? Does that mean we set our budget from the current $200,000 a year to 1.2 million a year, 2 million a year, 5 million a year? What does that mean, professional? And there was a lot of looking across the room at each other and scratching their heads. And I think the thing they all agreed upon immediately was that they wanted the caliber of the orchestra to improve. They wanted the sound of the orchestra to be better. And I was glad they landed there, because without a product, and I hate to be crass, but without a product, you can't sell and you can't raise money. And all of your dreams to be a professional orchestra won't happen if you don't have a product. So they allowed me, they said, we want a professional orchestra and we want you to get us there artistically and to help us with the support piece of it. And off we went. And I often stress that I didn't come to Tacoma, and this was all a conversation that was being held during my interview process. I hadn't been hired yet. I didn't come to Tacoma with an idea of what should happen in Tacoma. I was probing during the interview to find out what exactly the board wanted and the musicians that were on the board. And that sounded like something that was in alignment with my sensibility, with my character, with my personality. And I felt I could do that. And so if I were to be offered the position, I was ready to hit the ground running and go to work. But I stress, it was not my idea. I would never come into a community and say, this is what you need. I asked those questions before I was hired, got the okay and the approval of the board. And so in partnership with the board and the musicians on the board, we went to work.
Yeah. Well, as viewers of the former installments of this videocast will remember, you were preceded by a truly towering figure in Tacoma musical history, Edward Safarian,
Right.
with all of his national, international connections. And yet his mission was to, help people in Tacoma play good music. And they aspired to that, and they did that. And by the end of the 70s, they were starting to pay professionals to sort of beef up the sections that needed beefing up. And through the 80s, they got the theaters developed. And so sort of all the pieces were in place. But of course, it was still primarily community people playing together under Ed's expert tutelage. And so the idea that we want a professional orchestra, of course, there was some resistance to that idea because that meant some people were not going to make it through the auditions, right? I mean, some people were going to have to drop away in order to allow truly professional people to come in.
Right.
Were you aware of some of that tension?
Of course. Anyone who's done this for more than a month understands that transition from amateur to professional is very painful and can be very disruptive and destructive if not done correctly. It was understood by the board and the musicians on the board that the musician profile would have to change. It would have to change if it was going to become this professional orchestra that the board wanted and insisted on having. And so, yes, there were going to be growing pains, very painful growing pains. And I know for a fact that there are still hard feelings in the community from some individuals who weren't able to advance to the next level of musicianship and artistry that was hoped for by the organization. And that isn't a pleasant part of that growth and of that time, but it had to be done. And I'm so grateful for the support of the board and the community and the funders to say, we understand it's going to be difficult, but we believe in this mission, we believe in this cause, and we're going to trust you to do it in as humane a way as possible. And that's what we did.
Yeah. Just kind of a philosophical question, I guess. I mean, obviously, there's a wonderful place in culture for community orchestras, people who just want to get out and play, and their family and friends will come listen, and it'll be a grand time for all. But that's very different from kind of the function or the purpose of a professional orchestra. And I just wonder, what are your thoughts on essentially the social cultural functions of a community orchestra versus a professional orchestra?
Right. There are differences, and there are reasons for being. A professional symphony orchestra is in service to the art form. Number one, it's in service to the composers we play. It's in service to making sure that what we do is truly representative of what the composers have written. And that has everything to do with style and tone and execution and proficiency. The professional orchestra is in service to the art. The community orchestra, on the other hand, or the amateur orchestra, there's a concept of being in service to the pieces that make that organization what it is. If there's an individual who plays in the orchestra because he or she is fulfilled and their heart is full and their spirit is enlivened, that's an important aspect to all of the planning that goes into what happens with that community orchestra. Um, it's much more complicated working with the community orchestra than with the professional, because the purpose is more narrow with the professional. With the amateur and the community, it's very broad, and you have to take into consideration that you're playing for Aunt Betty, and you want the children to come and see their mom on stage playing the violin. You want some school teachers to feel like there's a place for them to continue their place of performance. They don't have time to keep their skills up to the level of a professional orchestra, but they're great musicians and they want to be involved on a weekly basis someplace. So when you're running an amateur orchestra, there are so many irons in the fire and so many plates that you have to keep spinning. Only the old people will know what that's all about. But you have to be concerned about that if you're running an amateur group. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to as I approach retirement. I'm looking forward to finding an amateur group and embracing that dynamic again, because it's fun. I enjoy it. No, we're not going to sound like the Berlin Philharmonic. We're not going to sound like the Tacoma Symphony, but we're going to have fun. We're going to have a purpose. We're going to make music, and I enjoy that. I enjoy it.
Yeah. Do you have maybe a couple of sort of milestones that you remember along the way with this project where you kind of said, wow, we have achieved step one now?
Well, it was a very slow process. I don't feel we really got to a place where I could look around and say, this is a professional orchestra until about my 7th year. It took a long time, primarily because there were personnel dynamics that had to be addressed and as I said earlier, in as humane a way as possible. And I took time to do that. My first 2 years as music director of the symphony, I didn't change any personnel. I didn't do anything. I wanted to see what we could do with the people who were here. How far could we go? How far could we improve? And we improved a lot. We got very good. So it was a slow process. It was very slow. So about the 7th year, we did, I can't remember, it was probably one of the Tchaikovsky symphonies. And a lot of amateur orchestras and a lot of community orchestras play Tchaikovsky symphonies, but there's a way of playing Tchaikovsky that tells you, that's what he had in mind, rather than let's just get the notes and the rhythm and call it a day. So when we played, I think it was Tchaikovsky 5, we played his 5th symphony. And that was a moment that I said, yes, we've made that step across that threshold. We are now in that, we are through the looking glass. We are there. And the beginning of our professionalism is beginning to shine.
Yeah, that's great. You know, let's bring in one of many Tacoma Symphony musicians that played under you for decades, it seems. This is Liz Paterson. Elizabeth Paterson, bassoonist in the Tacoma Symphony Orchestra for so many years. Let's welcome Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Hi.
And there she is.
Hi, Greg.
With your bassoon in the background.
I did that on purpose.
Very good.
Good for you. Good for you.
Well, Liz, of course, I first met you when you were a student at PLU, getting a sort of a combination music ed and performance degree. And you, I think you taught with Tacoma Public Schools for what, 6-7 years, and then you joined the Tacoma Symphony, played with them from what, 89 to 2017, I think it was.
Yep.
You were the education coordinator for the symphony for a number of years, and we'll come back to that soon. I think you were also in a couple of other roles, operation manager, personnel manager. You, of course, kept playing in your own chamber music groups, other orchestras. You taught for a while at both UPS and PLU. You've had your own teaching studio for many years. So, and I think you even worked with Tacoma Youth Symphony for a while, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you really are, you're kind of another one of those all over everywhere Tacoma musicians. But for our purposes tonight, you experienced that transition from Edward Safarian as a conductor and a personality to Harvey Felder as a conductor and a personality. And also that transition that we were just talking about from community to professional. And I just wonder if you have some memories of that, what it felt like, what was that experience?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's really interesting to hear Harvey talk about the progression of the orchestra becoming professional, and in reflecting on this over the past, since you asked me to come and speak on this, it was a long time ago. That was 30 years ago when I started in 1989, 30 plus, under Ed Safarian, and I guess my memory of him is that he was kind of an old school conductor and an incredible violinist. And so I think of him as this amazing violinist with these friends that he would bring, or colleagues that he would bring to solo with us. So we had some amazing soloists during those years. And he was kind of old school in the sense of maybe not being precise, and he was more emotional in expressing himself, and then when Harvey came on board, I just loved that transition because of Harvey's precision. He expected a level of playing that I was really excited about, and the music started to come together and be more, there started to be more clarity in the music, which is something that I really appreciate. And so, yeah, it was as Harvey said, it was a huge transition. And for me in my position and a lot of my friends in the wind section, it was a very welcome transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you sort of quake in your boots for auditions when you had to rise to that next level, or was that something you were able to do easily and very excited to be able to show off?
Yeah, I was super excited about it. And Harvey came on board at a point, I had taught elementary music for 6 years and was in a transition. I just finished my master's degree. And so I had the time to practice, and I practiced an etude to play for Harvey. And I just remember being really excited about the whole thing. Yeah.
That's great. That's really fun to hear.
Yeah, I practiced. Greg, you're a bassoonist. I practiced one of the Mildies. I don't remember which one. Those concert studies?
Yes, indeed. I remember them well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's bring another member of the orchestra here, whom everybody knows very well. And this is, of course, Concertmaster Svend Rønning. Let's welcome Sven to the stage and join this conversation.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Liz. So great to see you.
Hi, Sven. Yeah.
We don't see you now as often. It's great to be reunited with you in this way.
I agree.
Svend, you joined the symphony in 1999 and I think became the concertmaster in 2000. Is that right?
Right.
A position, of course, that you still hold, and that means we know that you sit in the very front of the violin section. We know that you tune the symphony at the beginning. You sometimes play a solo in the middle of a symphony. Of course, you have also taken the role of soloist in major concertos with the symphony. But I think it would be interesting to just get you to chat a little bit about, you've played with many conductors, and sort of thinking about Harvey's style, and the way Harvey works with an orchestra, and particularly the way Harvey works with you as the concertmaster. And maybe give us a little hint about sort of what is the role of the concertmaster, maybe in rehearsals before the audience shows up.
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess the short answer to what the concertmaster does is the conductor says jump, and the concertmaster asks how high. Right. That's pretty much it. But you know, you want to coordinate that how high with, you know, all of the other strings and indeed with the whole orchestra. So because the string sections are, you know, a single instrument each that are made up of many people, you do have to think about like kind of doing it or coordinating it in advance. So some of those things include making sure that all the choreography of bowing, the directions that the bowings are going to go, that's all choreographed before any rehearsals take place, indeed before any practicing takes place, because we want the musicians to have that all in their nervous system before they begin. And another thing that audiences might notice is that I tend to sit very big in the chair and gyrate around, and it probably looks like I'm a huge egomaniac, but that may or may not be true. But the reason one is doing that is so that the choreography of what I'm doing is designed to help everyone else know how to move and how to be together. So I'm trying to interpret, you know, what Harvey is doing into the language of strings, and then hopefully we'll all be together as a unit. The goal is to be together, right?
Yeah.
And it's a real art for it, and it's a very difficult synthesis to make that happen for everyone, not just for the concertmaster, but for all the members of the string section, because there's distance between us and there's acoustical sort of anomalies from the front to the back of orchestras and things like that. And so you have to kind of work on the alchemy of how to make that all happen. And sometimes that involves, you know, even like email beforehand, like we're going to do it this way this time, be ready for this kind of emotion, play in this particular style because last concert we were, you know, too dry or we were ragged on the endings or whatever. So I even find myself sending, you know, emails a week or two in advance of rehearsals, sometimes in coordination with the conductor. So I remember that Harvey and I would get together for coffee, or we'd have a quick phone chat to talk about what were going to be strategies to, you know, get the sections to be more together and more comfortable with each other. So vice president in charge of strings is what the concertmaster does.
Very good. Well, of course, it's interesting to note also that your predecessor in that role was Anne Tremaine, who was the concertmaster of the symphony for decades and also was your undergraduate teacher.
Yeah.
And so although there was absolutely never any guarantee that you would get the position, you did in fact take your teacher's seat, both at PLU and in the symphony. And that is, I just think, a wonderfully poetic sort of transition.
It is poetic, but I was so nervous at my audition because I'll tell you that, you know, there was this sort of presumption, right? And I was like, no, there's no presumption here. That's a presumptuous presumption, right?
Yeah.
And I really felt, you know, sort of overwhelmed by the shoes that I was walking into, and it was a very humbling experience, I will say, to take that mantle. And along those lines, I will say that maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I had occasion, maybe a decade after I became concertmaster, to play a couple of solos. I played Ravel, Sagan, and the introduction to Ronic Religioso. Just a couple months after Anne Tremaine had passed away from cancer. And I remember that one of the things that we did in that concert is we dedicated the concert to her memory. And because both Anne and Ed Safarian were violinists, I just asked members of the violin section to stand who had been taught by either Anne or Ed. And I think, you know, half the orchestra, half the violin section stood up. So it was really a poignant thing to see how the legacy of these people really literally lives on in the orchestra even today.
Yeah. And I spent a little time in this program on the concertmaster role because, of course, Anne was the concertmaster mostly under Ed Safarian and mostly in that community orchestra kind of model. And then she was the concertmaster through Harvey's initial 7 years or so that he was just describing as the transition. And then you took over as kind of the first concertmaster of what Harvey described as a truly professional symphony orchestra. In fact, let's bring Harvey back in at this point. And welcome back.
Hi. Hi.
And Harvey, you know, what is your from your position as a now that you've developed a professional symphony orchestra, what can you expect from your concertmaster? What do you want from a concertmaster? What is your relationship there?
Well, as Svend told us, just as someone who is someone who translates my intentions into the language of the string section, and Svend did that so well for me. I mean, I was just always just at ease knowing what I need is going to be there. Svend will know how to say it, just how to say it, when to say it, and it was. I don't like to micromanage my string sections. I like the concertmaster to do that. And if a sound emerges out of the string section that is different from what I had envisioned, I'm prepared to take that, because I feel the entity of the string section, they have the right to put their stamp on the sound of the orchestra. And I guess depending on who's sitting in that chair, it can be a natural, organic kind of dynamic, or it can be contentious. And I just feel so blessed that Svend was there, because it was just marvelous. And I never had to worry about anything. He understood the one thing that I absolutely insisted on, which was rhythmic precision, starting together, ending together, playing together, subdividing internally, making all 40 string players sound like one instrument. Svend understood that. So when he approached the bowings, he approached it from a perspective of, if this bowing gives us a little more rhythmic precision, let's do that, because that is what Harvey would want. And I always appreciated that, and just a fabulous guy.
Yeah.
Golly. Thank you, Harvey. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, yes.
I spent a little time on this because I think a lot of people don't realize just how important that position is, and particularly when you're transitioning to a professional orchestra, you know, that's just a critical role. Mm-hmm. Maybe let's bring Liz Paterson back in here, and I'd like to ask all of you if you have a favorite moment from this journey that any of you remember with particular fondness or significance. Liz, do you have one?
Well, that's really tough, because this musical literature is so fantastic, and I have to say that just the being a piece, especially in the wind section, because we have our own voices, being a piece of that living, breathing, resonating artwork is just, there's nothing like it. And breathing in sync with all of those people, 80 people, it's completely unique. And I have one silly story. When Christopher Parkening came, and I was the operations manager at the time backstage, I got to hold his guitar when he went back for his curtain call. So that was exciting.
That was great.
That's pretty good.
I should say that Liz is being very modest, but the key to the orchestra playing in tune is the woodwind section playing in tune. The key to the woodwind section playing in tune is the lowest voice in the woodwinds. Liz played the lowest voice in the woodwinds, and she delivered that foundation that allowed all the woodwinds to play in tune, which gave a tonal center to the strings and the brass. And so she is a champion.
Oh,
she's a rock star.
Oh my gosh, I can die happy now.
Rock star.
Svend, do you have a moment that you want to share?
Oh gosh, I have lots of moments. I think I could summarize them in two of them, if I may. You know, I came to Tacoma as concertmaster, having been concertmaster somewhere else, and so I'd already played, you know, the concertmaster solos and led orchestras. So that wasn't the new and exciting thing for me. But the amount of contemporary music that we did and the choices of contemporary music that we did, those were really memorable experiences for me. And I will say two of them are my favorites. One is your percussion concerto, Greg. That was an awesome experience. That was such a great piece. And, you know, that was just not something I even thought of as being, you know, like would be one of the most moving things I'd ever done, but it really was. And I also remember Derek Bermel's Shout, Whisper, and a Trace, sort of the biography of Bartók in New York. And that was really, really an interesting thing. The other thing that I had never done is I'd never done a whole bunch of pops concerts. And you know, most musicians will say, you know, they don't really like to do pops concerts that much. But for me, it was fun. And it was particularly fun when you would get these crossover artists that were brimming with ideas and talent. I particularly remember Deborah Henson-Canant, the hip harp performer. She was just so gifted, and, you know, just a wonderful speaker and performer and arranger. And the other one that I remember like that was Anne Hampton Calloway, who was, you know, just a magnificent singer, as well as a pianist and arranger, and could do all these things. It was, you know, seeing that side of the business move so quickly and being part of that was a great kind of cross training for me.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for it.
Sure.
Harvey, how about you?
Well, as Liz has already said, there are so many moments because the repertoire is so rich and so vibrant with ideas and experiences. I guess, you know, if I'm wearing my hat of ensemble builder, ensemble developer, if I'm wearing that hat, when we broke through a threshold that allowed us to play Sibelius' Fifth Symphony and play it with elan and with passion, that was a big moment for me. Sibelius being a favorite composer, that told me that the independence of his writing, the sort of stream of consciousness aspect of his writing, we could handle that, and the independence required by each section, we could handle that, and so it was just a revelation on my part to say, we are there. All of our sections are to the point where they can just grab a hold of anything and go with it. So that was an important moment. Wearing that hat, wearing the sort of conductor musical hat, just thinking in terms of playing a Mahler symphony, and again, playing it well, and not thinking about it technically, not thinking about it as pieces or episodes that need to be pieced together, but thinking of it as this incredibly arching artistic expression, and for us to enter the front door and involve ourselves with it, and then leave out the back door without ever thinking, boy, we needed to struggle with that, or at least they didn't show me they were struggling with it. It was just effortless, and that was an amazing moment when we did that.
That's great. One funny one, Harvey, I remember one time when you did Beethoven's Third Symphony, and you told us before you started that you were going to try an experiment. And you were going to try taking the second movement, the Funeral March, a little faster than it was originally usually done. And you just wanted to kind of try it out. And I just love that idea of a conductor being public with the fact that conductors do experiment. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, you do try different interpretive things, including tempos and dynamics and these kinds of things. And you were so clear about that it gave us a kind of a listening project. Wow, what do we think of this?
Sure.
And I remember loving that as sort of being involved in your exploration of this repertoire.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you have that memory, because that was a decision I wrestled with, because the traditional performances and recordings always had this very slow. It's supposed to be a funeral march or whatever, and it's always very slow. But the research I did talked about Napoleon's funeral march or Beethoven's funeral march. It was not a dirge. It was not a dirge. And so I said, I'm going to bring that. I'm going to go for that and see what happens. And I thought the piece just took on this almost a menacing quality that one might associate with a funeral or the end of life. And I was very happy with that decision. I have done it since at that tempo.
Good. Well, listen, Harvey, your other enormous legacy that we haven't even started talking about yet, let's take 10 minutes and do it, is your Simply Symphonic program. I remember these conversations. One of the first times you and I met, I came with some proposal about doing a young composer thing or something. And you said, well, that's interesting, but here's another idea that I'm thinking about. And you laid out this vision of this music education program that was huge. It was very ambitious and vast, and you were sort of finding people who were willing to join you in that. And I'm delighted that you asked me to be part of that. But there are music ed programs. You can pick them up and buy them and run with them. And you decided to start from scratch. And I assume maybe that's partly because you'd already been there and done that, and you knew what you wanted to do. But tell us a little bit about your goals, your vision, the development of the Simply Symphonic program.
Right. Well, as we've been talking about, I'm an educator, always have been since I was in 4th grade. That was my dream. So I've always thought in terms of developing a concept and sharing it with someone and helping them to understand it, and then to move and grow with them. That's just something that's always been a part of my sensibilities. And you're right, there are a lot of music education symphony programs. There are a lot of music education symphony programs. And I decided to start over simply because I didn't want a music education program. I wanted an education program through music. I wanted education and using music as a medium to educate, rather than this is music education. So consequently, we were talking about social issues, about math, about science, about language, all sorts of things, and using music as a platform and a place to draw our examples and our demonstrations. And that allowed the classroom teacher, not only the music teacher, but the classroom teacher, to invest in this and say, oh, I see how this is going to enhance my science lesson later in the semester, or enhance my language arts lesson that's coming this afternoon. That was very important to me when we were putting this program together, that it would be viewed as a resource to school teachers, not only music teachers, but all teachers that were involved in the program. So I believe Liz mentioned at some point that we went out and we found superintendents of schools. We found superintendents of music programs. We found classroom teachers. We found music teachers, and we put them all together and we started picking their brains and saying, what sort of thing coming from the stage with a symphony orchestra would excite you, and what sorts of things can we do? And we drew on their expertise, we drew on their experience, we drew on their expectations of what they felt was worthy of taking their children out of the classroom and bringing down to the Pantages. And we built this program together. I didn't do it alone. This was a program that we all worked on, Liz and the entire symphony organization, and lots of teachers and lots of professionals.
Yeah. In fact, let's bring Liz Paterson back onto the screen here. Liz, at the time, you were the education coordinator for the symphony. What do you remember about the beginnings of this program?
Well, I remember that it was a program that Harvey brought with him from Wisconsin, right?
Right. Parts of it came from the Milwaukee Symphony. That's correct.
Yeah. And that he had developed, and very specifically to have this booklet and excerpts of the music that they were going to hear, so that the kids would come to the concert with knowing what's going on, not just sitting in the seats. And then this other amazing part of the program of having small groups of 2 or 3 musicians go out, and we did 3 visits those first 5 years, maybe
Right.
5 or 6 years, and we played for the kids in the classrooms, and it's a really unique, beautiful program.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. We had the ensembles going into the schools.
Mm-hmm.
We had the teacher's manual so that
Right.
they could integrate the concepts into the other disciplines.
Yeah.
And then the culminating event actually it wasn't the culminating event, it was the penultimate event, was the concert at
Yeah.
the Pantages.
Right.
And then the culminating event was the follow-up that we did with the schools and the teachers after the concert. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very complete from beginning to end, and it caught on really fast too. Finding going out to schools and finding who wanted this program. Took a bit of legwork, but
Yeah.
yeah.
As I recall, there were 3 or 4 of these that sort of cycled around. Every year was a different one, so you made it through the cycle, and then it repeated, right? How many were there?
There are 4 total. And Harvey, do you remember I pestered you for a few years to come up with number 5, which was going to be Warm Woodwinds.
Warm Woodwinds, that's right. Because one of our programs was Brilliant Brass.
Brilliant Brass,
Which
that's
featured
right.
the brass section.
Yeah.
And the whole lesson plan of that concert sort of talked about the development of brass within the symphony orchestra and paralleled the development of literature or art or language or society in general. So that was one of our programs. And then we had one on form and structure, one on the elements of music, and one on, I can't remember
the Composer's Toolbox.
Composer's Toolbox.
Many Happy Returns, which is the form,
right?
Musical form, and then The Audience Knows the Score,
right?
Which was I'm cheating because I have it here.
The workbook.
Yeah, this is one of the workbooks. You can see. Well, Greg, you have this digitized. I don't know.
In fact, let's pull up I think there's about 10 just sort of excerpts from these books that I pulled out just so people could see what this is. So you can see that they included things like, of course, the first page there was simply, this is the one called the Composer's Toolbox. And the next page just shows you the pieces that will be played at the concert. And the next page.
Actually, Greg, that's the listening list. So there was a recording that they played in the classroom. So
okay. Yeah, great. So that they're prepped with all this before they come.
Right.
And the next page then. Sort of talking about this concert was called the Conductor's Toolbox. So these are the different tools, right?
Composers.
The composer's tools, right? That you and Harvey together decided you were going to put into this booklet.
Right. So it's just essentially the elements of music, from rhythm to melody to harmony to ensemble playing. Those are the tools that a composer uses to create these wonderful works that we play. So we systematically went through each one of them, again, trying to pair each tool or each concept with another discipline, so that there was this sort of generation of thought and idea. So this workbook that Liz put together with the help of teachers and other professionals was key to the success of the program. It was there in the classroom weeks and weeks and weeks before we appeared in small groups, and certainly before they came to the Pantages for the concert.
Let's take a look at the next few pages going on. So this is sort of instructions on what to expect in the classroom, and then what is concert etiquette. When you come to a classical music concert, most of those kids had perhaps never been to a classical music concert. So what's going to happen? How do you behave? Let's go to the next one. Now this is a good example. Liz, go ahead and tell us about things like the Washington State essential learning requirements.
Oh my gosh, I haven't been taught for many years, Greg.
I think you're referred to by teachers as the ELers.
Those are the guidelines that the education system has come up with that all students should come out of public school with. So, but this is one of the composer's tools, and this is the program that you were involved in, Greg. That you went out to the schools with me and Flory, and I think Shannon Spicciati was on that one.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on. Just a few more pages here, just as examples. So now we're getting technical, right? But then there's also, I see down here at the game activity number 8, there's sort of, activities that get the kids really involved and are fun and imaginative, so that they, this isn't just dry technical learning. They're literally physically involved. And go ahead to the next page. Yeah, and then who sits where on the stage, these kinds of things, very practical things. So
Right.
yeah, good. Well, that's enough. That's just a few examples then of the kinds of things. I mean, you could see that was a 44-page booklet. So these things are massive.
Yeah.
Right. Very comprehensive. And the idea being that if we're going to take class time, we're going to take teaching time away from their normal day, this needs to be of the same caliber that the lesson plans and all of the thinking that their classroom teachers are going into every day. We can't just make this a recess. This has to be pedagogically sound, and that was our whole mission.
Yeah. And I just want to mention Karen Pickett, because she really she took the job after I left, and she really did a lot with these booklets, and she really expanded the program. So she deserves big kudos.
Yes.
Terrific. And of course, the position continues. There's still an education coordinator for the symphony. And they're still out there in schools doing good work. So you guys were quite foundational. Let's show just a brief little video that the symphony made that shows a little bit of the impact of this Simply Symphonic program.
My name is Eileen Dalia, and I'm involved in the symphony because my husband Clark is on the board, and I also worked for the Tacoma School District and helped get Manitou Park Elementary involved with Simply Symphonic. When the children come back from the concert, their enthusiasm is almost overwhelming and contagious among the other students. We've got 3rd and 4th graders who can't wait until they're 5th graders so they can attend the performances.
My name is Brian Fox. I work in the Puyallup School District. At this point in my career, I have the privilege of supervising and working with our music as part of the arts education program. The Simply Symphonic experience has proven to be an incredible value for the money spent. And we in the Puyallup School District have continued to send students to Simply Symphonic because we see it as a critical part of our music curriculum. Harvey Felder is a natural educator. And he's a fabulous instructor. His demeanor on stage and his rapport with the students just makes it a great big giant classroom. And his ability to engage students and get them involved in the learning is just a lot of fun to watch.
Hi, I'm Coralie Gustafson. I'm an elementary music teacher in the Puyallup School District. I've been teaching at Sunrise Elementary for 33 years. It's you, Maestro, that is the magic of this program. Listening aggressively becomes the action of the day. I can't thank you enough for providing this orchestral aha for the 5th grade students in the community, not only in the Tacoma community, but in the greater area of Pierce County. Working with Simply Symphonic and being part of that program has been a pleasure for everyone who gets a chance to join you at the Pantages Theater.
Okay, well, that's pretty fun to hear that from teachers.
That was great. Thank you. What wonderful memories. Wow.
Well, we're almost at the end of our time here, but Harvey, it is again just so fun to have you back virtually in Tacoma and now kind of permanently archived in this series of videos about the long, long history of the Symphony Orchestra in Tacoma. We spent quite a bit of time looking back during this this installment and thinking about all these wonderful memories. But I know you, of course, are very active today. You're a very busy conductor and teacher, and it sounds like you're beginning to develop some new ensembles for yourself. Tell us just a little bit about what is Harvey doing looking forward?
Well, it's all sorts of things. My basket is full of plans and full of possibilities. I think the number one thing I want to do is I want to continue to make great music at a variety of different levels. Because as I mentioned earlier, I enjoy all the different levels, the amateur level, the collegiate level, and the professional level. So I'm fashioning ways to do that and trying to find the right venues and the right support just so that I can continue to do this. And it's nothing has really changed in my sort of perspective on making music, other than I want to sort of free myself so that I can do more music rather than being limited to one venue or one sort of strata of music making. That's sort of what I'm planning to do.
Yeah, I think I heard rumors that you're starting some new ensemble around Philadelphia or something. What's that about?
Right. That it's called the St. George Sinfonietta. And this is going to be an ensemble made up primarily, the thing that's holding it together is the mission. It's not necessarily a body of musicians that is constantly the same, but it's going to be a body of musicians that maybe one group on 1 month, and then we go, we move down to Washington D.C. We play another concert, and we gather another group of musicians to play that concert. The thing that they'll have in common is the mission, which is to bring music to underserved communities, bring music of underrepresented composers and underrepresented guest artists, and the body of the orchestra will change. I will be there. That will not change. So it's a project I'm very excited about. It's going to take time to launch and get it going. We had 1 or 2 concerts already with smaller ensembles, and it's getting incorporated and start the fundraising. All of that is needed to make it work. So that's a project. But then on the other hand, my collegiate work, I'm just loving working with my students at the University of Memphis, and before that, the University of Connecticut. It's just a labor of love, and making music and playing a Beethoven Fifth Symphony for the 40th time for me, but the first time for those students, and seeing them just come alive. That is such a thrill. I truly enjoy that. And then trying to find a place for amateur music making, for all of the people out there who have that violin in the closet and they want to play. And I want to inspire them and get them to dust that instrument off and play again. But probably the biggest change, the biggest thing about my future is, I don't know if your audience knows this, but I got married. I'm now a happily married man. I've been married to Emmy Albright for about 4 or 5 years, and we've been together for about 10 years, and it has changed everything. She is an absolute delight, a great musician herself. She plays piano, has perfect pitch, and can hear grass grow. Her ears are so good, and she gets me because I'm a musician. She's not a professional musician, but she gets us, those of us who are. And so that's the biggest change in my life. So
Congratulations. That's fantastic news.
thank you. Thank you.
It sounds like you're still building and you're still teaching and you're still exploring, just like you were before you came to Tacoma, and certainly during the 20 glorious years that you were with us. So I just want to invite everybody watching to, either silently or on screen or out loud as you like, applaud for Harvey Felder and the really phenomenal job that you did with that very difficult mission that the board gave you, and doing it with such grace and finesse, and really creating this thing which now lasts on after your time. And I mean, that's really quite an amazing legacy.
Well,
And
thank you. Thank you. It was a labor of love, and loved every minute of it. And I heard someone in Tacoma characterize my time as I came and I built a great instrument, and I played that instrument very well. And then when I left, I handed this wonderful instrument to someone else to continue to play well. And that is my hope, that that instrument will be played well long into the future.
well, again, thank you so much. I don't know if you've been had time to watch any of the comments over on the sidebar, but there are just so many clapping hands over there,
Oh,
so many
thank you.
hearts. I mean, you know, you just have so many fans in Tacoma. So
That is so nice. Thank you, Greg. This has been wonderful. I've truly enjoyed this time together and thinking about things I haven't thought about for many years. It's just really heartwarming. Thank you very much.
excellent. Well, again, let me help me thank Harvey for taking time this evening to join us. And Maestro Felder will be in touch, and best wishes in your new endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.